Now, the way the finances are implemented in each project differs from country to country. In Guatemala, the equipment was purchased with USAID seed capital, as well as some technical assistance, but the operations capital came from the local nonprofit. There was a little bit of price reduction from the telco, which you can consider a limited in-kind donation from them, and the entrepreneur gave a little bit of investment, but really the bulk of the operation and monthly costs will be taken over by the local nonprofit.
Now in Colombia, USAID did provide the seed capital as well. However, the level of investment on the part of Avantel was significant, even not only matching but being much more than what USAID's financing levels were. However, the other component that's very interesting is the potential investment on the part of Intel Capital. They're presently reviewing the business plan to see if it's of their interest to invest in the project. And lastly, the real feather in the cap is access to the universal service funds. The Ministry of Communications has adopted this as their policy position and will be providing funding to expand along this model line services for rural telecommunications around the country.
In Paraguay, the money did not go towards equipment because of the nature of the project. It actually went towards services, both telco services, connectivity services, and subcontracting the nonprofit to take over the project and to implement it. There was a small contribution from the telco building towers in areas with no coverage, but essentially the question of sustainability after the subsidy finishes has not really been resolved in this financial model. Fundación Paraguaya is working on business models with each of the beneficiaries, but it's still not concrete. The entrepreneur role also varies from country to country. In Guatemala, it goes along the lines a little bit of the original model, which is a small entrepreneur providing commercialization of connectivity services. In Guatemala, the entrepreneur is also providing some additional socioeconomic activities with IT-enabled services or connectivity-enabled services.
Now in Colombia, we're actually looking for a much larger business entrepreneur. This is because the project no longer is just one small municipality or locale, but rather these are the departmental or state-size deployments. The services and the activities the entrepreneur undertakes is principally commercialization of connectivity services, and then they are the person on the ground who develops content and ensures that there's a lot of alliances that feed the process to drive demand for the connectivity services.
In Paraguay, the entrepreneurs are really not commercializing connectivity. The connectivity is really going straight from the franchise over to the beneficiaries. But there are entrepreneurs that are focusing on developing IT-enabled services in their communities where there was a beneficiary donation, a connection. We're going to spend some time looking at the challenges for each country. Depending on the point of the process, there was either a green light, a yellow light, or a red light, depending on how it went. In Guatemala, the design went well, green light. We kept to the original design of the project fairly successfully. We also found a project owner. Unfortunately, we had a little hiccup there at first with Export, but after that we did find a good project owner who also provided counterpart investment. The legal framework, in theory, is good, but it limited the project a bit because we could not use Wi-Fi. Because it's so liberal, we really could not use Wi-Fi. And that forced us into higher cost technologies, WiMAX, which are better in the long run, but affect a little bit of the sustainability at the beginning of the project. This also led to delayed partner negotiations. Because we had to go with a frequency that was owned by somebody, we had to negotiate with the owners of the frequency, which were Unitel, and that provided very little leverage on the part of the implementing partner to get a good deal in the contract with the provider. So that was a little bit of a hiccup. It took a long time to finally sign the contract, and Unitel is taking the bulk of the profits. The installation is also affected by the similar concept, even though there are several technology companies, there are very few companies that can provide a backhaul from Guatemala City to Tecpan, where the town is, using the specific technology that Unitel needs. This has caused a delay in the project. The original, similar to Colombia, the original person or the original group that said they could do it, they went and all through the process won the bid, and then it turned out that they could not deliver the backhaul. So we're having to renegotiate with new providers now. So operations and a break-even point have not been reached in Guatemala. However, there is potential for scaling, at least within Tecpan, with an additional donation from USAID Guatemala, the mission. We still have not figured out how we're going to scale it nationally yet because of the cost of the microtelco. But the content and context projects are very successful. We already mentioned them, and there was no hiccup in any of those.
Now, how have things gone in Colombia? Well, in terms of design, it's a solid green because we've been able to stay fairly loyal to our original design. The project ownership as well has been fairly green simply because we've had ownership on the part of Avantel, and they've really taken the project by the horns. In terms of the counterpart investment as well, that's a solid green, as we have not only matching funds, but in fact additional level of funding on the part of Avantel because of the requirements in terms of coverage of what the license that they've received requires. Legal and regulatory framework, that's a bit of a yellow and a mixed bag because the Ministry of Communications did take a long time, even though they were open to reform, to process the new frameworks as well as to issue the frequency licenses. Now, partner negotiations as well, that has not gone as well as we would have liked in one specific element, which is the ownership of the content and context components of the project. Avantel is just now bringing on board a new staff that is taking care of that component, so this hopefully will be turning to green very soon. In terms of installation and setup, we've had a little bit of a delay there because of the procurement process. We were looking for the 802.16e mobile WiMAX platforms, which are just coming online now, and in the bid process, the equipment providers overpromised, and at the time of final negotiations, they changed the terms of the contract of when they would be able to deliver and install the equipment. Therefore, we're having to retender, and that process should be over very shortly. Operations and break-even point, those are still open issues. However, the scaling is looking very good simply because of the interest of Intel through their Intel Capital branch of investing, and as well as the national regulator being very interested in deploying these very similar models through their digital territories initiatives. Now, in terms of content and context, like as we said before, this is a bit of a mixed bag simply because the projects lack ownership in terms of transfers over to Avantel, but it's a very big green in terms of the number of stakeholders and the quality and type of services we're able to launch, including tax payments, e-commerce, education, health, and different types of applications.